Africans at home and throughout the diaspora. Unity is strength. We've got the power.
Stop the fussing and the fighting. Now the time to do the right thing.
We need more UNITY. Come.
Stop the fussing and the fighting.
Yeah.
Now the time to do the right thing.
In the spirit of Umoja, embrace with love.
Let's do it right now. We've got to do it right. Stop the fussing and the fighting.
Right now.
Now the time to do the right thing. Let's do it right now. We've got to do it right.
Right now. Right now.
Let's do it right now. We don't need to fuss and fight.
We've got to have peace in Africa, yeah.
Let's do it right now. We don't need to fuss and fight.
The war must cease.
Listen up.
Let's do it right, Africans. We build the world on new foundations. Let's do it right, Africans. All we need is determination. We've got to do it right.
Do it right.
We've got the power.
Let's do it right.
This is the hour.
Yes, yes, we're going to do it right. We're going to stop that fussing and fighting. We're going to represent. We're going to get it together because our people demand it, expect it, and deserve it. This is Jamala Rogers, your host of Voices from the Battlefield, and I'm here at the Black Radio Hall of Fame inside of Harris Stowe State University, our historically Black university. So we are going to be talking to a special guest today, but we need to know that Voices from the Battlefield is connecting folks from all over the country who are on battlefields. They are sometimes on multiple battlefields because that's sometimes what is required of us. But we are trying to connect the various struggles so that people know that they are not in isolation, that there's other folks in other places struggling with the same challenges that we have here, and that, you know, in some cases we're making some strides. So we want to hear what works in other places. We want to hear what some of the successes are. We want to inspire those folks or have them inspire us who are on the battlefront for justice, freedom, and equality. So we have with us today Brother Jomo, Free the Land.
Free land by any means necessary. Excited to be here and to have this conversation.
Yeah, it's like we talked about before we came on the air that it's been a minute, but you all were able to come here during Ferguson to help get some leadership to that in the midst of a lot of chaos. And so really always appreciative of that because that's what organizers do, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was great to meet y'all, do the work, learn so much, saw so much from that little tiny experience. Yes.
Yeah, Jomo, we need to write a little book about that, don't we?
Yes, we do. Right.
So, but before we start, I wanted you really to remind people that Brother Mukulu Shakur is going to be getting out December 16th, and we want to let people know how they can support that effort. We had Taliba here a couple of weeks ago, and she gave us the background, the history. So we want to give folks the website and how they can contribute and what the contribution is going for. So if you could just do that, and then we'll dive into what we need to do for our movement.
Absolutely. Right now, we're asking folks to go to the Linktree/Free Now, where folks can get information around how to donate to his cause. Absolutely, he is coming home. It's actually been interesting piece because we've come under a little bit of attack since coming home. The PayPal account that has been used to gather donations, they shut it down. PayPal shut it down, terminated the thing, and apparently we were getting too many donations.
Okay, hold up, Jomo, because that's how I made my contribution. Now, please tell me that everything that went in, you all are going to get. Otherwise, we're going to have a little national protest here.
Right. Yeah, we already at the freedom funds, but we have a really good security practice, so we were already moving the money over. So whatever they froze, I think it was like under $1,000. But I think that's really important because we've had to shift kind of all the mechanism by which we were trying to gather support for Dr. Shakur, who is coming home. So they tried, but they haven't really. We've still been successful in getting the things to get him ready to come home. We're excited about that, and there is still more work to be done. And that has been some of the work around that we've been doing at MXGM, not only winning the freedom of political prisoners, but also trying to figure out what's the continued care for our warriors once they've come home, and have been a part of efforts around like Herman Bell, trying to get him housing, the return of Sundiata Akole, trying to get him settled. And so again, the work continues. And I think that's part of one of our huge lessons coming out of this is like preparing for the after, which it felt some kind of ways because I think we were in a way where it's like we're just gonna fight, it never feels certain in the plan for victory. Felt like a thing, but I do think that is a huge lesson learning, like preparing for the win when you get it, having the stuff ready, being clear around the state's continued interference and by any means, and the power of policing, right? Because I'm pretty sure that they are behind some of the pushing these institutions to make these sets of decisions.
Yeah, one of the things I told Taliba, I'm like just beside myself that even though he had a medical release, that they allowed him to do that because we fought for other folks who had terminal cancer and other medical issues, and the state.
Oh, you chopped up a little bit.
So what I was saying was that they, I should have got my headphones. But what I was saying, in some cases, I was telling Talib that even though there's a justification for a medical release, the state still did not allow that to happen. So the person ended up dying, alone in prison. And so I was really surprised that this was happening, but elated at the same time.
Yeah, we credit the people. We've been saying that only the people will free Dr. Mutulu Shakur. We absolutely believe that it was the pressure, the petitions, the actions that folks were willing to take that really helped make the Department of Justice and the U.S. Parole Commission do what it should have been doing, right? I think that's also some of the bittersweet of it. It's like long overdue. Could have been done it, should have been done it, but speaks to the political nature of his incarceration. And condemns the system.
Yeah. But I think you did right by mentioning the other two warriors that have been released, and sometimes unbeknownst to like the larger population about that, and the fact that we still have warriors in cages across this country that need to be out. And so when they come out, I think we just ought to be able to use that as a platform to talk about the political prisoners that have been in there for 20, 30, 40 years, and see how we can get them all out. But that's part of the continued struggle. So again, we're going to mention that website before we leave today, and make sure that people, if they want to give something towards that, to make this brother's transition from prison to home, as smooth as possible. And he already has some medical conditions, and Taliba said he's in a wheelchair. So we have to make sure that, there's ramps, there's, ADA stuff that's going to help him be comfortable, and make sure that we do our part. So, Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to hearing from him in his own words, and to make sure that we did what we were supposed to do, and that he could say, I got this, I got that because of y'all. That's what I really want to hear. So, but I'm also encouraged that it was because of people doing the petitions and putting the pressure on them that they were almost forced to do the release.
Yeah, it was, absolutely. That, they were, he was gonna get death by bureaucracy if folks didn't step up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So again, we'll mention that again towards the end of the program. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, Jomo, is really looking at the perspective of organizations in the Black Liberation Movement who've been observing the conditions of our people, I would say in the last 10 years, maybe even post Ferguson, because you had in there COVID, you had in there Trump, there was some conditions that contributed to more suffering for our people. But I always say those conditions also open up opportunities for organizing. So in terms of Malcolm X Grassroots organization, how are you all looking at this particular moment, the political moment, and any opportunities for us to take some leaps and what those leaps would look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important for folks who are new to who MXGM to understand our legacy and lineage that we come out of, because that shapes what we understand the potential opportunities and threats waiting before us. So we see ourselves as a revolutionary new African nationalist organization trying to exercise an anti-imperialist strategy for a socialist revolution, right? And part of our understanding is that how that has been done, as Malcolm taught us, revolutionaries want land. If you look at how the question of colonization has been solved by peoples of the world, then the answer has been kind of the strategy and the trajectory that we've been on. And as the ancestor Chokwe Lumumba had taught us when he was amongst us, that there's also the strategy, and then there's the ways that we have to adapt to the times and be tactical about it. And so I think to that particular moment, we are in question around what did we just experience, right? We just on some level saw, probably at least as the narrative is created, the largest social justice movement of Black folks in the world at any particular moment. And when that has kind of ebbed or subsided, we're in a question around kind of what remains, what has left, and has it risen any other organizations? Has it moved us any closer to, for us, the strategic goals around national independence, human rights, self-determination? I think for us particular, right, like we have Chokwe's son and daughter in Jackson, Mississippi, helping in some ways, leading the city as the mayor, and then the People's Advisory having gone through this water crisis this past year, right, and being in a particular position around trying to relate to the federal government and the state. Again, speaking to kind of the environmental conditions that Black folk are being faced with in other Black and brown communities around the world. So I do think, we're in a peerless moment for us, and particularly, again, the pandemic, the level of police violence. For what that's meant for MXGM has been a real focus on how we build the kind of what we call the political martial culture of our folks. So how do we build more kind of community self-defense units? How do we prepare ourselves for what we understand could be this fascist backlash if Trump decides to run again, and what we saw with January 6th? So for us, I think our call has been clear around, like, we need to organize our communities for self-defense, that we really need to figure out how we build people's networks, people's self-defense networks, our own self-defense networks, and self-defense networks that connect with other captured communities that will be subject to police, state, and even now mob violence, right? I think that's a particular stage that we have to be thinking about, particularly as we've seen the level of shootings happening. Buffalo as a particular example that stands out for us. And so we need to be preparing ourselves to organize for our defense. And I think it raises some questions around human rights. Again, we saw the largest social justice. Again, if that's the narrative that we're saying, and then there's a real question around raising the level of human rights. but to whom and where. And I think there's also this question around kind of internationally, right? A lot of our strategy has been supported and collaborated with kind of other social movements in the world, other just struggles. So being kind of connected to those, and what does that open up? So for us, it has been a focus on this self-defense, and then also mutual aid, right? Like, again, how do we prepare our communities for, again, what we believe are coming austerity measures, again, high rising prices around gas and food, wages not rising, right? And we are always mostly directly impacted, at every intersection, right?
Absolutely.
It is us.
Absolutely.
It is us. And so it does raise this question, right? And I think for us, it does raise the question around land, the question around space. Where can we be free? And I think that's, again, for us, though, those answers are coming back to always being about being able to organize our folks at a grassroots level around our principles of self-defense, self-determination, and self-respect.
So I think you're mentioning the massive movement after George Floyd, where millions across the world were in arms and protests. And what is your assessment as to why we couldn't make more of that moment than what we did?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think some of it is in the question around it. I mean, what do we understand movement to be? Is movement a series of mobilizations, or is it actually generating a series of organizations, a multitude of organizations, fronts, and things fighting for a particular cause? And I do think, like, if we look at it honestly, it feels like it's not unfair to say it was a mobilization, maybe the largest mobilization, but there were questions around infrastructure. I think, the huge questions even now around Black Lives Matter, it's fracturing its inability to hold the infrastructure. I think there's questions for us, and even as MXGM, as folks are becoming woke, as our enemies call us now, what was in our inability to bring in as many new people as we could be. So I think that there's some real questions around organizing infrastructure. And I think this goes back to our question around Mutulu and political prisoners, and really understanding what COINTELPRO really intended to do, its level, and what it decimated community organizations, right? I think sometimes folks think it's like, one or two political prisoners. We're talking about 200, thousands of people at one time. 12, they're talking about like Fred Hampton, and Fred Hampton was one of 12 that were killed by the state, right? So this intense state violence, this repression that has been met, that really wiped out community organizing for really like 50 years, and then folks really trying. And then I think there's just this topping that happened with nonprofits, right? And kind of this way then that they became the replacement of community organizations with radical politics. And there's a lot of confusion then around what happened, right? Like, if you talk to the kind of average kind of activist or person who's becoming into struggle, right? It's literally like the 60s and then now, right? And
right, exactly. Nothing in between.
My ancestors, you know what I'm saying? It's like, wow, there's a whole history of struggle that happened 80s, 90s. We didn't stop fighting, right? And so I think there's a way that, again, we're still in the after effects of that, and what it means to actually not have that infrastructure. I often think about being in the campaign is, I've been in this question around what has it cost our communities to not have Dr. Mutulu Shakur amongst us for 35 years, particularly as around my block, they are struggling with fentanyl addiction, that folks are dying, that in my community, they're passing out Narcan all over the place.
I got some in my purse, yes. Mm-hmm.
And we have been without our healer, right? We're in this pandemic, right? We don't know who to trust, right? We keep our mask on. They say it's we say no. You know what I'm saying? And we have no sense of central authority, no people that we trust to actually give us relevant health information. For me, that was like, yeah, Mutulu was out, that work was happening. We were building institutions. We would have a place in a center that could offer direction. This is how we protect our communities. And so I just think that we can't escape that and having a conversation there, what it's meant to really cut off the head of a people, and for us to try to be spending the next 50 years trying to find our way,
and regroup. Basically.
Regroup. Yeah.
But,
and then making a lot of the same mistakes, right?
Yeah. Because I'm thinking about the comments you made about mobilizations and people thinking that is the end all, as opposed to mobilization is part of a larger strategy. And so if that's the end all be all, like then after that ends, then that's it. But that's not the way it's supposed to be. And so it seems to me, to your point about there was not enough community organizations and organizing to say, hey folks, when this happens, here's where you take the movement. And that it was just not there. And so I think there's been some missed opportunities. That was one of them when we had the whole world looking at us to be able to say, here's how you build community organizations. Those people that are mad, angry, let's pull them into some of these organizations so that it really is going to mean something afterwards, instead of just we all feel good about we were part of a protest.
Yeah. I think people should really look at what happened in Minneapolis right after that, right? And speaking to the need to build power, right? I think you had a really good example of this mobilization that happened, this active resistance, right? Then you had Black organizations like Black Visions and others trying to build a campaign to move policing from the thing and for it to be, kind of shut down, which I think, again, brings us to this question around the state and its connection to power and what is going to be the counterforce to this, because they are committed to their police.
Well, and not only that, while we didn't make the most of that political moment, they did. And so they garnered all their folks around, backwards white supremacist ideology, and they're forging ahead. How else can you explain to me why there's 1 percentage point between Senator Warnock and a buffoon like Herschel Walker? I mean, really? This is where we are?
Yeah. It's definitely a sign of the times. As we've been returning to this new normal, there's been nothing new and nothing normal about it.
No, but where do you see opportunities for us to make some leaps forward? I'm looking at the fact that, and I'm going to go back to your point also about the nonprofit industrial complex, because I think we can't ignore the elephant in the room, that has had a huge impact on the way that we are organizing now, as well as the caliber and character of community-based organizing right now. It's more like up here, as opposed to really going into our communities, into our neighborhoods, and organizing working class people. So what's you all's take on that?
Yeah, I think that we battle against it, though we're in it, right? I think a lot of again, if you're doing any kind of local organizing around any issue, like along the way, you're gonna come across a community group that's a nonprofit that probably believes in some level of social justice, and wants to be involved in struggle, but ultimately will be hamstring or be limited by what they believe their funders, white philanthropy in so many cases, white capitalist philanthropy money, right? To say, kind of, when we talk about racial capitalism, right, that same set of forces are now also funding our movement. It has absolutely a shaping factor in terms of the character, what we think about it. You can't have, how you going to talk to somebody about, being rigorous and in an organization, and it's a job, right? And our orientation around job, which makes a lot of sense for people who have been slaves, is I'm gonna give you the least amount for the most amount that you can give me, which makes a lot of sense if you're an Amazon worker and the other places. But in a community organization, there is a different level of sacrifice that organizers have been asked to make in the past. And I think that's where that definitely that professionalization could get there. I think that definitely shapes it. The funding shapes it, shapes what the things, even if if we really want to untangle some of the stuff around BLM, right? It boils down to this foundation stuff, right? And all the mechanisms, and even the stuff, like we saw in Ferguson, right? The foundations were a force on the ground, promising things, saying, making all these things, and then they disappear and deliver, and then you get left being like, what the hell happened? And or who makes that decision? We don't get to decide who gives the money to where for the movement, right? Right? They're just throwing it or making decisions. So that completely decentralizes any kind of sense of self-determination amongst organizations. And it definitely, as someone who has tried to, building an organization, right? MXGM doesn't take foundation money or money from the government. So we got to ask our people for the money. And that drives a real level of relevancy, right? Because you asking somebody to give you're asking a working class person who's raising family, do all the thing, one, to give up their time to do something. So that sharpens you so much, and you're asking them to make a financial commitment or sacrifice to the organization, and you have to be trustworthy over people's funds, right? Because you are absolutely dependent on them. That shapes the relevancy of your programs, because if they're not showing up, they ain't paying for it. All of that kind of gets erased when you get a foundation and you get a check, and you're going to get paid whether or not people walk in the door or not.
The level of accountability's got to be there. But I remember, a conversation that I had with Akinyele Umoja, who was another member, esteemed member of MXGM, and we were talking about this notion of the nonprofit industrial complex. So I was making the point that we are losing a lot of our best and brightest to the nonprofit industrial complex, because if there's an opening for something to happen and it's about the people, then quite naturally our people may apply. But he said, Jamala, the opposite also happens. Like when folks work for those people, they come back to an organization like MXGM, and they bring some of the watered down politics with them that they use to operate in the nonprofit world. And I'm like, wow, I just never put those two together, but you're absolutely right. And so in many ways, it's a double whammy for organizations like MXGM, like Organization for Black Struggle, because you're losing people because they have to have a job, and you think, okay, that'll be cool, that's the job, and they get paid, but it's shaping and coloring and socializing them in a way that they probably are unconscious of. And that when you get ready to have like those strong, radical, unapologetic politics in the streets, somehow they just aren't there.
Yeah. No, yes, absolutely. And I think, again, you're talking to a nonprofit Negro, and I think Akinyele is absolutely right. It's a constant struggle, like, yo, I want to bring a skill or a competency back, but definitely have to check and make sure this politic, and sometimes even the politic underneath the skill, right, has to be interrogated. So I think you're absolutely right. I agree with that. I think we definitely struggle with that. I think with the other side of that is that, there are folks who they're in this thing. They realize this politic or whatever this thing they are working for is just that. And then they are, kind of in MXGM trying to find a what they now call, the term is a political home, right? Realizing that this nonprofit is just that, it's just a job, right? And I think when you think about it like that, you will make some very clear distinctions around what you're willing to risk for a job versus something you're willing to risk for liberation and struggle. And I think, that's absolutely. And I think that's part of the capture that we have to be aware of around movements.
Yeah. So when you talk about the political home, that's exactly what I advise people, particularly younger people, that, okay, it's a job. And it's just like if you were working at GM at the end of the shift, that's it. And then you do your movement work. You go to your political home, which is going to nourish you, which is going to affirm you, which is going to be the place where you get to really organize people. So I think if you look at it that way, then it's easier. But apparently, it's not that easy, because you're on that job 8 hours a day, sometimes 10. And so all of the nonprofit stuff and the jargon that goes with it just kind of seeps in. But
Yeah,
it seems to me that Jomo, we got to make a break
yeah.
somewhere with understanding that in a clearer way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think absolutely it is been a search around like how do you make the break? How do you contain it? Because it doesn't feel like it's containable, right? There is such a like the way the nonprofits are set up is like, kind of mission and we're all in and everyone is giving everything and everyone's all overworked to begin with, right? So you're just joining in the overwork crew from the ED on down, right? And that gets called mission. And it is really hard for folks to cut it off. Also, part of it is the like sets of relationships that get generated. And it's a break. I do think that some of I think one of the folks I work with, Denise Perry, she always makes the point to groups around this 501c3 being a legal status, right? And that's just all it is. It's a tax status, right? And I think that has gotten lost, right? Again, in how we understand the development of organizations, that has completely got lost. And so instead of that being the tactic, it is now the strategy towards building movement and and I think we saw that a lot in Ferguson, like everyone's popping up and creating organizations out of the blue, but it was all 501c3, all intent to try to catch this money that was coming down and try to build something. I think it's, well intended, but it's misguided. If you think that, I remember my mentors like, if you think that they're going to pay you to destroy their system, you got another thing coming. Right?
Yeah,
and I was like, you're absolutely right. Thank you. I will take this little nonprofit check, do my job, and then
feed my family.
Right.
Yeah, right. And move on. Yeah. But I think that is a piece that our movement is going to have to really struggle with because the lines are so blurred now. And this whole generation of younger activists who were sincere when they came in, no fault of their own, think that this is the avenue to do that. So when you think about like, that's a tactical thing in terms of how you build the movement, that this is one way to do it, but it's not the strategy, then I think we'd be better off. But there's not enough of us talking about strategy. There's not enough of us talking about political analysis. There's not enough of us talking about the need for study and the rigor that goes with that. And so I know that we have a lot to do around that. This is Jamala Rogers, your host of Voices from the Battlefield. I'm here at Black Radio Hall of Fame, live at Harris Stokes State University, our historically Black college. And I'm talking with Brother Jomo from Malcolm X Grassroots organization. And we are talking about what is to be done in our movement. What is the next steps to galvanize people, but also to have the greatest impact in a post-Trump COVID world. And I always say that because I think that the burden of those two have taken a toll on our people, but particularly I've seen it take a toll on organizers. So I always try to mention that it's not you going insane. It's like the burden of those two things, plus all the other things that we have to juggle and deal with as we try to make revolution in this country on behalf of our people. So Jomo, what I'd like to talk about, because I think there is an opportunity in Jackson for us to look at what governance could be in this country. And we have there, Mayor Lumumba, we have, the assemblies, we have people really struggling to involve people in the democracy in a real way. And as you know, that has not been easy, particularly when we have structural racist issues like water and people's ability to get safe, clean water. Like what does that look like? Because I don't think most of us understand that even with the organizations that we are part of, we really are incubating for the bigger picture of how do we govern ourselves if we get a city, if we get a state, if we get a region, and if it's based on what it looks like for how we run in our organizations, we might need another refresher course.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think it's important for folks to really understand that the point of the Jackson Kush plan, the point of running Chokeway, the point of running Antar, was not because we believed in the United States government, that we believed in the state of Mississippi. One, the people were asking Chokwe to run. I think that's really important. They were calling for it. The People's Assembly became part of the preconditions by which he was like, this is how I will run, and this is how I would want to govern. And I think that has been a really powerful model that we need to see more of as we think about, as we struggle with Black politicians, right? Like, and being able to, one, get them into office, but then hold them accountable, right? Like, that's always the message, right? Like, you got them in, but you got no mechanism to hold them accountable. And so it's like, how do we build the People's Assembly again with this idea? I think, again, to understand kind of MXGM's kind of orientation and like our kind of, the organization gets started as an idea of trying to, how do we rebuild and build a run up to revolution, right? That spreads the politics broadly and widely amongst our people to get them, as Kwame Ture talked about, ready for revolution. And so I think the experiment in Jackson has revealed a lot for folks, for all of us to learn from, in terms of the questions of governance. And some levels, as I have been looking from afar and various there's in so many ways that a lot of the challenges and struggles that we're experiencing in Jackson with the administration, the water, handling issues around policing, right? Antar's been dragged around that. All on some levels reflect, I'm like, man, these feel like some of the same issues that we saw African revolutionaries post their revolution trying to lead a state in a continued world capitalist system face and encounter. And even to the, the stoking counterinsurgencies, right? They really wanted to try to blame Antar for the water crisis that had existed.
That's been going around for centuries.
Well before, right?
Before he was born.
Right. The questions of privatization of the schools, like immediately, right? There was an attempt to try to do that. Wildly enough, right? Then you had foundations trying to jump in again to try to mediate a conflict between the local government and the state government, right? So it has been such a learning lesson around that. I think also, but underneath that, it was also trying to really get a sense of the pulse of our folks around kind of where they are at around our politics, whether or not, again, a revolutionary nationalist could win. But it was more about kind of where the people are at. And I think that has been really a solid lesson. And also the needs of organization and capacity building, right? And that though folks are winning in Jackson, right, it requires a whole level of kind of continued capacity building that has to be thought about and thinking about when we think about governance, what it means to win governance power. And again, and then in the modality again of Jackson, Mississippi being the blackest part of the country, Jackson being the blackest, thing in a white state, in a white controlled government. And so it's like there's so many contradictions, so many layers there. And then what we're again finding these levels of corruption. There's, I've heard some of I can remember some of the stories around like kind of even like trash, like, all this money being made off of our folks from these by these privatizers, Black folks posing, even comprador class, right? It's a crazy thing, right? Like you have like these Black businesses that are just basically fronts for white businesses that are getting contracts
and are pimping off our people's tax dollars. Yeah.
Right. So it's like all those sets of issues that disabuse any kind of Black utopian Wakanda that we might think, and really being clear around winning power is just the beginning of our struggle. But I do think it raises real questions around what governance is really possible. What are the contradictions? What are the compromises? Even trying to maintain state power, right? Because you could very easily, again, the way we understand the United States government system is set up, the state could take the city at any moment. And
can we say Flint, Michigan?
Yeah, Flint. Yeah.
So, to me, this is the crux of helping our people to understand what liberation is. Mm-hmm. And we have places where there are Black mayors.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't nearly as progressive as Brother Lumumba is, and so I think for him and for Ras Baraka in Newark, New Jersey, like how can we support those folks to push the model as far as we go with it? We already know there's limitations and how far we can get. But when we try to get people to understand governance, a lot of times they have a very utopian notion about what people can do when they get into office. And I'm sure Brother Lumumba, when he got in there, he found some surprises too of what he could and could not do. And so to me, it's like this whole education about what is governance, what is this country about? And I know we've been here for a long time with this foolishness, but we still don't understand it. We still don't understand how to move and also how to take advantage of those opportunities that we get, those organizing opportunities. So you get a Brother Lumumba in. What do we need to do to support that brother? Because I'm from the old school of the Congress of African People, where we were told to make sure that we show that the system is corrupt and unworkable. So you're in it and you're pushing it.
Yeah.
But you want the people to see, we've done all we could do. There's limitations. It's not working for us. What do we need to do differently for governance and for self-determination?
Yeah, I think this is where the people's assemblies in Jackson and the work again that Rukia is leading is a really critical factor in that. And I think that's the mechanism around one, like you're raising, how do we generate new political authority that is beyond state government processes and procedures? What that sets up in terms of a confrontation with the state, and bringing folks again to the limits. And I think that's, again, some of the, the organizing lesson, right, that folks have to live, right, to be like, actually, this system my actual experience says the system does not meet my needs. I went through a process. I told the government, this is the thing that I and others, right, we said this thing, and you all don't want to do this thing, right? I think that again raises the question around self-determination, raises the question around human rights, and then raises the question, what are we going to do about it, right? And I do think that then that also then pushes us out of that range of the nonprofit.
Well, so for example, when you were talking, it reminded me of the whole defund the police thing and the abolition of police and the prisons, and the fact that folks don't think that they could do without the police. But then when you say, well, how many times did you call the police and they didn't come? Then it's like, oh yeah. So to me, this is right for us to really be talking about alternatives to the system that we have, because it's just not working for us. No way, no how, nowhere. Only thing that's working is occasionally you're gonna get a bag of goodies from the pantry. But other than that, in terms of real power and what you talk about, the new political authority, that they're gonna cut us off at the knees every time. And so when we organize people, I think we really have to show the vision, the socialist vision of what we're fighting for. Otherwise, they're gonna miss it. They're gonna miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. Absolutely. I think, yeah. And I think that's some of I think that's even some of what we kind of even lost, right? I think with the transition of Chokwe and some of the vision and, the like kind of practical survival things that are needed. And yeah, I think there's a way that, and I think it's back to that question, how do we get a break? How do we get a restart? How do we really reground ourselves, get our feet underneath us to really maybe be able to do a pivot and move another direction, right? Which is, again, what the intent of the Jackson Kush plan was, right? It was this idea of this transitory plan. What do we do till this thing that we're working on arrives, or that we make happen, right? And that was, again, building out that model, that set of alternatives, people's networks, safety, people's, the people's networks around kind of alternatives to community safety, right? Folks should let your model be resistance, right? That lays out not only cop watch, right? But there's like 13 other formations that folks can be organizing, offers of campaigns that folks can be organizing around, that carry around the themes of self-defense and self-determination to really build kind of alternative institutions around that. I think we've had really great examples with the stuff around mutual aid. Again, I think that stuff has been in danger of being co-opted and being nonprofitized, right? And it's actually just radical charity, right? I'll be like, so I'll be like, sticking your little political sticker in the toothpaste thing. That's not political ed, right?
No,
One of the ways
it's
that
funny,
really,
but it's happening. It's happening.
yeah. And there's such a way, I think Barbara Smith talks about identity politics, where she says, yeah, they took the identity, left the politics. It feels like that's the thing. They take the thing and leave the ideologies, take socialist solutions, but leave socialism out of it, right? They'll take revolutionary nationalist ideas, but leave revolutionary nationalism out. And that's, again, and I think that's some of the danger we have to be aware of. We have to really educate our folks, really offer a vision. I think that's some of where we are at, right? And I think that's the underneath the question, right? It's like, we actually don't know. We're trying to figure that out. And I think we don't figure it out alone. I do think we have to struggle with one another around where we are in the world at this particular moment. What have we seen? What does it mean, and what is it, what do we need to do differently in our organizing to really create a new tomorrow?
Yeah, and that's, it sounds so eloquent when you say that, but I know it's really a challenge.
Right.
In the first roundtable that we had, one of the panels was Maurice Mitchell from Working Families Party, and he had just put out this paper, just coincidentally, of building resilient organizations and movement. And I know one of the things that was focused in on is like how we turn on each other when we really should be trying to figure out how do we resolve these conflicts so that we can really fight the enemy. Do you see that piece of sort of call out culture and all of this sort of individualism and liberalism that's in our movement, one of the key places where we need to do some work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We really need to work on the collective we, right? And I think that there is, again, a way that understanding like the way the capitalist system works, the culture that it generates, like, again, they took Audre Lorde and left Audre Lorde, right? And everyone is running around talking about self-care, devoid of any of the things that she was about, right? That's like, it's really profound. I'm like, do y'all even know where this is coming from? This is supposed to be an act of war. Like, this is not what Audre Lorde was battling cancer, right? Like, what, like, that's
Jomo, the same thing happened with sister from you know what I'm talking about, where she said leaderless, and they took that
Ella Baker,
Ella Baker. Yeah, they took Ella Baker's thing and like just said, we all leaders and we don't need y'all. No, that's not what she was saying. That's not what she was saying. We need leaders.
Right.
We need to have conscious leaders that are accountable to the movement. That's what we need to have.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that's some of the like the culture, right? Like, everything is like these sound bites, these, Twitter, like these. And so you get this stuff again stripped away of its context. We're not studying. I think that's part of helping to build the we. I think that's one of the things that we hear from the elders, right? Like, we need to study. And I think we can, in a moment where it's hot, right? And you're ready to get out there, studying seems like the last thing you want to do, but sometimes that actually might be the best thing that you can do in a particular moment, is actually be able to have an assessment around what's happening and what set of actions that you're going to take. So I definitely think that that's part of the work, the transformation that we have to have. How do we get back to a real we? The stuff that we're up to is really about just us. Again, you can track so many of the fissures, the conflicts, they come down to this individual or individuals, and we've lost a sense of we. I think that's, again, important to understanding what COINTELPRO was trying to do in terms of, again, also disrupting the culture of our communities, and breaking that down. So absolutely that, and yeah, and the only way we get out of liberalism and then really transform ourselves is actually being in groups and collectives, right? So I think that's definitely one, and that requires us, it sounds nice, but that requires a level of humility, real wanting to belong,
And discipline
real,
too.
and
Discipline.
discipline. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
And I think that is a big thing that's missing right now, that people feel like there's a political home, and not just a political home, but one that has the elements that you just talked about. You have to have, criticism and self-criticism. You got to be in a space where you feel comfortable with people calling you on your stuff. And they're calling you not to some retribution, but because they want you to be a better person. They want you to be a better organizer. They want you to be a better revolutionary. And so I think some of those political homes don't really exist in that way, where the rigor of study is a natural part of that. It's not like an add-on where you're like, oh, here we go again with this. No, this is who you are. This is how you learn. This is how you learn the lessons from our ancestors, the lessons of folks who've done struggle before. Otherwise, we're just going to be restarting and restarting. And we don't, why would we want to do that when our ancestors have given us the North Star?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I think that, again, COINTEL was intended to cut off intergenerational movement, right? To stop it there, to dissuade young folks from being a part of movement, to, all those things. So I think, yeah, that it is such a needed part of it. Yeah, it's how to learn, right? And again, what we understand this social change being a protracted struggle over generations, right? And yeah, it seems even wild, even in our struggle, right? Like as we were trying to escape slavery, right? We keep giving out the bad map. Like, tear that map up. That one don't work. That one leads to the slave catchers. We need new maps. And I think that, for all of us who are part of political homes, we have to have the orientation that the biggest room in all of our political homes is room for improvement, right? And that Asada talked about that, that we don't have a right to bore anybody to death, that movement can't be stagnant, that we have to continue to be alive and adapting and meeting folks where they are, not leaving them there, and then transformation, right? And so
but you all are one of the few groups that could actually say that you're national, in that you all have 8 chapters around the country. So are some of the things that you talked about doing this show, are some of the things that those chapters are involved in, like the patrols, those things folks are doing where they are in the chapters?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was cutting in and out. I didn't hear
So
that.
I was saying, are some of the things that you mentioned here or the same things that your chapters are doing, because you're one of the few organizations that have more than one chapter in the country. So I think you all have about 8. And so are you all doing like the self patrols for policing? Are you doing electoral work? What does it look like for the chapters?
Yeah, absolutely. Chapters are, we have a national program that consists of kind of, again, modeled after the Jackson Kush plan around building dual power, building self-defense, people's assemblies, the work around political prisoners. A lot of our chapters have really been in around the Free Matulu Now campaign, building local Shakur squads, which have been folks to get involved in the campaign. A lot of our work has been really around trying to build out kind of our community self-defense practices and units in our various chapters. So a lot of work has been done, again, kind of relearning what it means and how do you do that under COVID, right? That's been a whole set of work that folks have been involved in. Folks are all, supporting local fights around policing, because we understand, we agree with the people around around the issue of policing. So that's been a lot of work helping to support, and also kind of helping to bring a radical edge to those discussions, very similar to how, our lineage and Ram and others were in these other part of organizations, coalitions, really pushing them to the limit of their politic. And so that's been a lot of the work. And I think nationally, the chapters have often been contributing around kind of the question of new African women, gender, sexuality. I think it's been a real important fight that folks have been in and trying to again offer an analysis around this kind of stripping away of women's rights, its connection to Black women and their bodies, and expanding it. So that has been some of the work, and really again connecting that back to the day-to-day struggle of folks doing it. So that feels like and folks are again kind of doing a range of different folks, different things in those buckets, but those seem to be the three that folks are really engaged in at this particular moment.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I think those are the key places where I think there's opportunity for growth and for expansion of our movement. So I really appreciate the work that you all have done, particularly in the South. In our last few minutes, I would first I want to thank you for joining me, and also thank you for taking on the struggle of our political prisoners and keeping that in front and center, because it's so easy to say out of sight, out of mind. And these brothers have given so much to our movement that they deserve more than that. So can you leave us with the way that we can contact the donation page, so we can give generously, if we can, to Brother Shakur and his homecoming?
Absolutely. Folks can go to Linktree/Freematulu now. That should carry you to our page that should have a way to donate, and folks could click there. Again, like we talked about, we've had to make some changes to how we collect donations. So there should be a new thing there, but if not, I can send that in the chat around the new link that we're using. Folks can also send checks and money orders directly to CAD on the thing. All right, that's time to wrap it up.
Yeah, so I'm so excited. When I heard the brother was coming home, I was like, man, this is so profound. And we want to be able, like I said, him to feel the love of seeing that he got out of that place, got him set up, got him everything. Now he can just reflect and sit back. Yeah, he's paid his dues. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Jomo, for joining us. This is the second in a series of what can we do with our movement? What are we going to do? Can we move ourselves out of spaces, silos, to really, as you said, do the we, focusing on the we, and building a liberation movement for our people. Thank you. We'll see you next week, same time, same place.
Right.